Hello again, everybody. So far, we've assigned the informative speech. We've talked about informative speaking to help you really have some direction on getting your topics picked out for the informative speech. Now what I want to do is I want to transition into sort of walking you through some of the pieces that we're now going to add on to what we did in the narrative speech, okay? So in the narrative speech, the goal was to, first of all, tell a story and talk about how it affected you, but to learn what the preparation process of public speaking is like, to see some structure in a presentation. And so you worked on an introduction, you worked on a body, you worked on a conclusion. So now we're going to hone in some more on the body of the speech. We are going to come back to the introduction. My memory's failing me right now. I think it's in next week, but if not, it'll be upcoming. But we're going to hone in on the body of the speech, okay? And so we are going to focus on organization, connectives, and speaking notes right now, okay? So what I want to do is walk you through some ideas for organizing the speech body that makes your speech easy to follow, okay? First and foremost, when we're talking about organization, it is all about the audience, okay? Your audience should be able to know where you're at and what your speech is about at any moment in your speech, okay? So what I want to do is hit my next slide here and talk about different ways of taking those 2 or 3 main points in the body of the speech and organizing them, okay? Now that's, main points are the big points. You can have subpoints and stuff like that, but these methods right here that I've got on this slide are ways for you to organize your body of the speech so that your audience follows what you're saying. The best public speakers are able to carry an audience with them and have the audience know what they're saying. Go, oh, okay, I know where they're at. Oh, that makes sense that they went from there to there, okay? So here's what you're going to do. For your informative speech, you're probably going to pick one of these top 3 here, okay? And I'll tell you why in a minute. Actually, I'll tell you why now. Causal or problem solution are usually used for persuasive speeches, okay? So I would caution you to not use causal organization or problem solution organization in the informative presentation. They inherently carry an argument, okay? Causal is usually cause and effect, or effect cause. You can go either way with that. And so I will elaborate more on cause and effect and problem solution when we get to the persuasive stuff. I will talk about it here a little bit, but I really want to make sure that you understand your options for organizing your informative speech. So first thing is chronological. This is probably a no-brainer for some of these topics, okay? So chronological just means order of events in time, okay? And the cool thing about this is you can go past to present or present to past. Sorry. I'm boring myself. Even, no, I'm not bored. I'm sleepy today. So chronological, you can go past to present or present to past. Or you could even go past, present, future, depending on what the topic is. You could do, future, present, past, or maybe even jump around a little bit depending on the topic. You could do, future. Let's envision this particular future. Now let's go back to the past and then come to the present. So as long as you're dealing with time in an ordered sequence, that's chronological, okay? So this lends itself to a lot of informative speeches. Some of those biography speeches that were possible that I mentioned could work for this. If it's a process, that could work for this. The speech that I mentioned where the student was talking about the process for brewing beer, that was a chronological speech. So chronological is a really good way that tells you how to put your points together, okay? That's the beautiful thing about the speech template I talked about for the narrative speech. You still want to use that speech template. You still want to have the attention getter, the thesis, the preview, okay? The transition into your first main point. We're going to talk about transitions next. But when you get into the body of your speech, if you realize chronological works, it tells you what your first point is. Oh, I start at the beginning. Okay, well, let's start there, and it's easy to follow that way. Topical is an organizational pattern that probably quite a few of you used in your narrative speech. Where it's like, okay, so first I'm going to talk about this, next I'm going to talk about this. Topical is just breaking one big topic down into subtopics. That's all it is, okay? Sorry, I'm going to have everything go wrong with me today. I'm going to yawn. I'm going to have a frog in my throat. I'm going to forget my words. So you never know what's going to happen in my screencasts. So topical is where you take one big topic and just break it down into subtopics. Now here's the thing. With the topical organizational pattern, all you have to do is make sure that the breaking down of the ideas makes sense to someone who's not you. Okay? Sometimes you're able to do that just by thinking through this and going, okay, if I were listening to myself, would I be able to understand what I'm saying? Okay. And that can really help that work. Next is spatial. Now, spatial is a really cool organizational structure that most people won't think of. Okay. It's not just relegated to space, even though it's called spatial. But like, for example, if I were going to do a compare and contrast speech, compare and contrast works for spatial. It can also be topical. Okay. Your book has some really good, by the way, all of this is in your book, and your book has really wonderful breakdowns of these and examples of these. So don't just rely on what I'm saying here. Go to your text. Your text has good stuff on this. But spatially, I could do a compare and contrast speech between, how food is treated in the United States versus how it's treated in France or something like that, right? And I would organize it not chronologically, not topically, but spatially. I could locate my first main point in the United States and locate my second main point in France. You see? I can talk about, if it's a persuasive presentation, I can talk about, the effects of sugar on the human body, and I can go spatially, let's start with your brain, let's start with your stomach, and let's start with your belly, or whatever, your stomach and your belly might be the same thing. I am delirious, apparently. So spatially, though, you can think differently about how your main points are going to be organized. So it doesn't have to be topical. It doesn't have to be chronological. Think, is there a way that spatially this makes sense? So sometimes it's really cool, especially if you're doing like a history of an event or something like that. Usually the word history makes us think, oh, let's go chronologically. Well, sometimes spatially works better. It's like, let's talk about the history of the civil rights movement in the United States. And instead of going down a list of events in order of time, let's do locations. Let's go to what was going on in, Alabama. Let's go to what was going on in New York, whatever, right? And then if you look at it spatially, your time and chronology doesn't have to necessarily be in order. You could say, let's start with the early events of the women's rights movement up in New York, right? Let's talk about, and there's all these different ways of putting it together. You can kind of marry spatial and chronological if you need to. So usually informative speeches are going to be one of these three, usually, okay? Now, you could give an informative speech talking about, I'm going to deliver an informative speech on the different known causes of cancer. Okay? And you're not arguing for the causality. You're just saying, here's a list of things that we know cause cancer. Make sense? Do you see the difference there? You're not arguing for the causality. You're just saying, here's what we know are causes. All right? The causal, and it's causal, not casual. So many of my students will reverse that U and that S right there in the middle. It's with an informative presentation, that's how you make that work. Okay. Now, problem solution is usually persuasive as well, but if you're going to use it in an informative presentation, it looks like this. There's a common debate out there. I don't know what your topic is. There's a common debate out there. Here are some of the problems, and here are some of the solutions people put forth. You can't argue for one particular problem in an informative speech. You can't argue for one particular solution in an informative speech. You would just say, The national debt in the United States is hundreds of trillions of dollars. I don't know what the exact number is, so I just how much it is, okay? Is X number of trillions of dollars, and there are many different sides to this debate. So let's take a look at some of the problems people say are out there, and let's take a look at what some of the solutions people have proposed. You can't argue for a particular problem. You can't argue for a particular solution. And sometimes what you might even do is marry some of these. And this is another thing we'll talk about with persuasion. But like with persuasion, it's really common to go problem, cause, solution. Okay? Where you would have this as your first point, cause as your second point, solution as your third point. I mean, you could do that with informative, but it's tough. Okay? So folks, that's the ways to look at organizing your informative speech in the body. Be specific about picking something so that your points are easy to follow. These are things that will naturally just flow in the minds of your audience members, okay? You don't have to worry about them following along with you if you've got good, like simple, logical organization, and this is how to do that, okay? So moving on, another way that you make your speech easy to follow is something that was in your reading for this week as well, is connectives, okay? Now, your book walks through all the different kinds of these, and it does a great job of it. Read the book. It's a really good book. So connectives is sort of the term generally used for connecting different pieces of the speech, okay? You might hear someone talk about transitions or signposts, and technically your book gives different definitions of these, but they all serve the same purpose, okay? They all serve the purpose of going from one point to another and bringing the audience with you, okay? So your transition is, the way the book talks about it is, the transition is more along the lines of saying, now that we've looked at the problems proposed with the national debt, let's take a look at what some of the proposed solutions are. That's a transition, okay? There are many different versions of the transition. Your book gives really great options. This is where, on that speech template I posted, and I'll make sure to repost it as you're prepping for your informative speech. This is I call everything a transition, okay? So transition into first main point. You can signpost it if you want to. You can use whatever different wording you want there, but you got to have something there. So one of the things I want to show you is this, the pause test, okay? Your speech from now on should pass the pause test, okay? And it really is applicable in this online class because I could pause the video. But essentially it's this. I should be able to know where you are in your speech if I randomly pause it at any moment in the speech, okay? So if I wait 45 seconds and hit pause, I should be able to know where you're at, okay? Oh, they're still in the introduction. Oh, they just transitioned into their first point, and the first point is they're going to talk about the first step in the process of how wine is made. Okay, cool. You know, if I pause at 4.5 minutes, I should be able to know they are clearly wrapping up their last point, which is solutions to the problem, or some of the proposed solutions to the problem, and it feels like they're about to go to their conclusion, right? I should be able to pause your speech at any moment and know where you're at, all right? That's the kind of organization I'm looking for here. So you use connectives, transitions, signposts, internal summaries, and reviews to make that happen, okay? Think of it this way. Have you ever driven somewhere where the signs are not helpful to you? Or maybe there's a sign you're used to seeing, and all of a sudden it's gone, and you're like, oh my gosh, like, think of these literally as signs. That's why signpost is one of the options. Literally think of these as signposts, as a roadmap for your audience. So when you're in your introduction of your speech and you give that preview of main points, first we're going to cover this, then we're going to cover this. That's that big green sign on the interstate that says this exit is in 1/2 mile. This exit is 1 3/4 miles, and this next exit is 2.5 miles or whatever it says. That way they can see and know where they're going and what's happening. I'm going to hit pause, and we'll pick this up in part 2, okay?